Mention the words postcode lottery, and most of us would automatically think of the NHS, because we've all heard stories about how somebody is being denied the drugs they need, whilst a neighbour just down the road with a different postcode would get them. But our next story is slightly different, because it's about somebody who was getting the drugs they needed, and then all of a sudden, because of the postcode lottery, they were snatched away.
Welcome to Salford, Lancashire, where Sue and Brendan Costello are living with the consequences of a prescriptions postcode lottery.
We got married on the 5th of July, and during that week I went in to have my lumbar puncture done as part of my honeymoon, to always remember it. Wasn't nice. 19th of August, I went for the results, just basically expecting to say I had a trapped nerve in my leg or something, and he didn't. He sat there and told me I had MS. I just burst out crying, because that to me was like the icing on the cake. That was somebody telling me it was quite bad. Then I went back to work.
Before she had MS, her personality was virtually the same, but her actual quality of life was completely different. She was a keen walker. We used to go up to the Lake District a lot, go on some great walks, shopping. She used to be going shopping with her sister every weekend.
Sue has been living with her MS, multiple sclerosis, for almost 10 years. It's a degenerative disease which prevents the nerve cells in the brain from sending clear commands to the spinal cord. Its causes are unknown, but its symptoms get progressively worse.
Can't do all the things I used to be able to do, which is very frustrating. I drag my leg about, or I can't walk properly without having to steady myself. My foot is just like a lump of dead meat. I can't move that at all, and I have to wear like a shin pad to help me support my leg. It's reduced the quality of life, because now all I seem to do is go to work every day. I'm shattered when I come home. I sit down, my husband has to do everything for me. I don't have any time for the little boy. We don't go out or do anything because I've got no energy, because all my energy is reserved for going into work. So it's a vicious circle.
What made things worse for Sue was that, like a number of other sufferers, none of the licensed drugs currently prescribed for MS eased her symptoms. Then, almost 4 years ago, Sue was offered an unexpected lifeline when she heard of a new wonder drug called Sativex. Sativex is a drug made from cannabis. It is legal because all of the elements that would naturally cause a cannabis high are removed first. And it works because the active ingredients that are left radically reduce the pain in the inflamed nerve endings of MS sufferers. Professor John Zychek is an MS consultant at Derriford Hospital in Plymouth and a strong advocate of Sativex.
We have a lot of experience of seeing people that have been exposed to cannabis-type drugs. And Sativex is as much a cannabis-type drug as any of the others that we've been working on. And you get the same benefits from the patient perspective. They have reduced spasms in their legs. They have less stiffness, we call spasticity. They have less pain. It may help their waterworks, and it can help other symptoms as well. The longer they go on it, sometimes their symptoms gradually improve. So much so that we're testing whether some of these drugs actually might alter the progression of multiple sclerosis.
So keen was Sue to try Sativex, she immediately signed up as a guinea pig for medical trials.
The first thing I noticed, having taken Sativex, about 10-15 minutes later, I actually got pins and needles in my foot, which was absolutely remarkable. And I can remember sitting there shouting for my husband, shouting, Brendan, Brendan, I've got pins and needles in my foot. She
got so enthusiastic about things that she couldn't do physically that she was seeing starting to happen again.
And also, when I come home from work, I wasn't as shattered, and I'd be able to come home from work and spend a bit of time either with my little boy or my husband, or we'd go out or whatever, instead of being constantly worn out. It just made such a massive difference.
The medical trials were successful and Sativex was given a licence to be prescribed across the UK. Sue was thrilled.
The day the drug became licensed, I wrote to my consultant and asked him if I could now have this drug. He wrote to my GP and said he recommends that in my case Sativex would be beneficial in improving my symptoms, and he would appreciate it if the GP could prescribe it for me within the NHS.
But when the reply came from her local NHS primary care trust, it exposed the cruelest of postcode lotteries.
Unfortunately, because my GP is in Salford PCT won't support the funding of that drug, so I couldn't have it.
Having put her own health at risk and having benefited others by volunteering for medical trials, Sue is now being denied Sativex solely because of her postcode. Sativex is a government-approved drug. However, it is down to the primary care trust in every area to decide if they wish to fund it. At a cost of around £5 per day, it compares unfavourably with other, cheaper MS drugs. It might be the only medication that has given Sue relief from her disease, but purely because of the postcode lottery, she is currently being denied it.
It's one of the cruelest things I've ever seen put upon anybody. How many toasts do you want on your bread?
Just two,
Just
please.
two, okay.
It's reduced the quality of life because my husband has to do everything for me. I think it's very unfair. What is the difference? Why should it make a difference where you live in the country as to what treatments you're allowed to have?
But the Health Service postcode lottery means that it does. And as with every lottery, there are winners as well as losers. A number of the primary care trusts do fund Sativex. And when the drug was licensed in 2010, Dr. Zychek was able to prescribe it for some of his patients at his Plymouth PCT. MS sufferer Susan Bence was profoundly grateful. Until Dr. Zychek prescribed her Sativex, she was seriously considering ending her life.
I was actually that bad and didn't know what to do with myself that I got to a stage where I said to my family, I just don't want to be here anymore. I would like you, please, to book a flight and I want to go to Dignitas.
As a family, we just couldn't believe what she was saying, and we just couldn't accept it. We just would not accept it, and tried to find different ways of you know, getting around this problem that she'd now given us.
They were appalled, overwhelmed, couldn't believe it, devastated, like I was.
Thankfully for Susan and her family, Dr. Zychek was able to prescribe Sativex to her in October 2010. The effects of the drug on Susan's condition were immediate and profound.
Since now taking this drug, Sativex, the quality of my life is so much better, not only for me, but for my husband and family as well. I obviously have a better sleep pattern, more restful, less spasticity, and also my muscles are of a much better density now. I can move around a lot better.
It's unbelievable, it changed our lives completely. There was a time before she had Sativex that sleeping with my wife was a nightmare. It was like me sleeping on the edge of a cliff, because every time I used to turn over in the bed, it used to set all her pathic pains off in her legs, and she'd be screaming and crying all night. So Sativex has settled all her pains down completely. She more or less goes for the night, and so do I.
And for any MS sufferers thinking Plymouth PCT is a beacon of hope in the fog of the postcode lottery, Dr. Zychek has some unpleasant news for you.
The local commissioners decided that they would not commission this drug, and I've been told to stop prescribing it. So I'm not allowed to write any new prescriptions for the drugs. People that are already on it are able to receive their drugs, but I can't write any new prescriptions. It's incredibly frustrating not being able to help people when there are drugs that may help them. And it's not as though we're asking for huge quantities of money or huge numbers of people here. The numbers of people are very small.
Back in Salford, for Sue and her family, the agony and the anger remain unresolved.
Faceless bureaucrats, they can so comfortably sit behind their desks, they so comfortably go to meetings, they so can comfortably make decisions about other people's lives without ever having experienced such things. To me, it's just sheer hypocrisy, because if it was something happening to them, they'd be the first who'd be banging on the drum about how they should be able to have it.
If I could get a hold of one of the people from the PCT, I would say to them, you want to try living with this condition. One of my local hospitals have just been granted to prescribe Sativex to some patients who are terminally ill. And I think, is that what I've got to do? I've got to be ready for dying before I can have the medication that makes me feel better. It just seems so unfair.
When the Postcode Lottery team contacted NHS Salford, they gave us the following statement. NHS Salford cannot comment on an individual case. NHS Salford follows guidance produced by the Greater Manchester Medicines Management Group. Although Sativex showed some benefits against placebo, as the data is not yet fully published, the clinical significance of this is unclear. In accordance with this guidance, NHS Salford does not commission Sativex.